Tonight, a bomb threat causes a soccer match to be postponed in Germany, while a manhunt intensifies throughout Europe for an ISIS terrorist. We'll have a series of reports.
Actor Charlie Sheen makes a surprising announcement about his health. We'll have that later tonight.
And we will have the first installment of Shush Tonight, an interview with NYU's head of admissions.
Serrano. Now, here's our top story. All of Europe is on edge at this hour as fear and tensions rise. A bomb threat led to the cancellation of a friendly soccer match between the Netherlands and Germany in Hanover. Meanwhile, an international manhunt is underway after Friday's deadly attacks in Paris. European officials are coordinating in search of Salah Abdeslam, a 26-year-old French citizen believed to be the 8th attacker on Friday's rampage. The Belgian Interior Ministry's Crisis Center released 2 new stills of the subject, who remains at large and has an international arrest warrant. French police are also looking for a second unidentified fugitive directly involved in the attacks. French officials told the Associated Press that an analysis of the attacks showed one person directly involved in them was unaccounted for. As part of ongoing investigations, French authorities carried out 128 new raids last night. To help carry them out, 115,000 law enforcement officials have been mobilized across the country. Officials are also saying a car found in northern Paris with Belgian license plates could be linked to Friday's attacks. The black Renault Clio was discovered Tuesday near the train lines that link France's National Stadium, which was targeted by 3 suicide bombers. It is the 3rd car identified as having possible links to the Paris attacks. German police also arrested 7 individuals thought to be involved in the attacks, but they were released after questioning. New threats have surfaced in Hanover, Germany, where a stadium set to host a soccer game between Dutch and German teams was evacuated. Officials said they received concrete information about a potential bomb threat and found a suspicious suitcase inside the stadium. Top government officials, including Chancellor Angela Merkel, have been scheduled to attend the event. It has been 3 days since Paris was rocked by a series of brutal terrorist attacks that left 129 people dead and hundreds injured. The City of Light is now obscured by the dark clouds of war and uncertainty. Our Lucas Vasquez interviewed Matilda Gracia, a Parisian journalist who talked about her reaction to the attack.
As a citizen of Paris, how did the Paris attacks influence you?
It's terrifying. I mean, I think we were not prepared, obviously, even though after the Charlie Hebdo attack, we should have been aware that the threat was still there. And as a journalist, I'm still very touched by everything that happened. And as a journalist, it's just been crazy. There are journalists everywhere from all over the world. You hear people speaking all languages, and it feels like we're in a movie. It's unbelievable.
Why do you think these attacks happen in Paris?
I think it's very easy for terrorists to come to Paris since we have Europe is open, so as soon as you can get into Europe, you can then lead like a network all around Europe. So it's a good target. It's not as hard to access as the US is now. And I think France represents everything the terrorist hates. I mean, it's a country we're actually waging war against them in Syria and Iraq.
Is there going to be a crackdown on civil liberties? Are we going to see more militarized police force? What do you see the government's response being?
Well, so far the government's response has been indeed to crack down on civil liberties, and they're trying to extend now the state of emergency that allows them to arrest people without a warrant. So I think, yeah, and that's why I'm scared, is because I think that we are indeed going to crack down on liberties. And the response is going to be, okay, we're in a state of war and we have to do everything that's in our power to stop it. But I don't think, personally, I don't think that's a good way to solve the situation, even though I don't know how to solve it, but I think it's a dangerous path.
Do you think the French public will react positively to a more militarized response in the Middle East by the French?
I don't see how this. I'd like to believe that if we destroy the Islamic State there in Iraq and Syria, then we'll get rid of it. But I think radical Islamism is everywhere, and I'm not sure we'll solve the situation by bombing over there.
Do you think there's going to be a larger backlash in France and in larger Europe against the acceptance of these refugees, which was already a very contentious issue this past year?
I think the authorities are going to pay more attention and try to find a way to check the identity of all the refugees that are coming in, but obviously there are so many of them that it's very hard. I've heard in France that I think François Hollande, but also other officials from Europe saying that we have to separate the two issues of terrorism and the refugee crisis, and I think it's very important to draw the line between the two different issues. They're completely different.
Back, the country has invoked the European Union's Mutual Defense Clause, which calls on all 28 EU nations to support France's war on terror. France has escalated its bombing of ISIS strongholds in Syria, and now Russia has begun bombing ISIS positions as well, an indication that Russia and the U.S. are putting aside their differences. Jordan Scott has this story.
The fight against ISIS has intensified since the deadly attacks in Paris on Friday night, killing over 150 people. French warplanes delivered a third day of airstrikes to the militant group stronghold in Raqqa, Syria. France has reached out to both Russia and the United States to join forces with their coalitions to fight ISIS.
There's a new awareness. People are coming together in this coalition, which we built. I mean, the coalition has only been in existence for a year. 1 year. 1 year ago, we didn't have a coalition. 1 month ago, we didn't have a political process in place, which we now have, with Iran and with Russia at the table, which gives us an opportunity to perhaps get a ceasefire in place within the next 3, 4, 5 weeks and move to get Assad transitioning, because he's the magnet for this terrorism, and then begin to focus on Daesh itself.
The EU Commissioner, Pierre Moscovici, also joined in, saying Europe must unite in combating terror.
There needs to be a discussion on the way the EU can unite its effort in security matters. This attack to France is an attack to human values, to European values, and we all stand, I'm not saying that because my country of origin is France, I here represent the European Commission as a whole, and President Juncker in particular. We all stand by France and by the French people, feel full solidarity with them, and are ready to provide all our comprehension to President Hollande's efforts to fight terrorism.
And Governor John Kasich said the U.S. cannot afford to wait to act.
What is more, with ISIS having directly threatened the U.S. homeland, we can't afford to wait. We must act now. We must invoke Article 5, the Mutual Defense Clause of the North American Treaty, and bring NATO together to assist our ally France in its defense. I agree with President Hollande that Friday's attacks were an act of war by ISIS on France, and therefore they were an attack on America and every other NATO member state.
After the attack on the Russian passenger jet last month, Putin has made it clear he is ready to strike back.
We won't easily wipe away the tears in our hearts and souls. It will stay with us forever. But that will not prevent us from finding and punishing the perpetrators. We should not apply any time limits. We need to know all the perpetrators by name. We will search for them everywhere, wherever they are hiding. We will find them in any spot on the planet, and we will punish them.
I mean, this is a group that is so ferocious in its barbarism that I believe we, all of us, are going to band together, and ultimately we're going to prevail.
As ISIS feels the backlash from allied forces, Muslim communities around the world are feeling the growing specter of Islamophobia. The fact that one of the Paris bombers posed as a Syrian refugee has caused upheaval from Europe to the halls of Congress in Washington. Republican presidential candidates and governors are saying no to Syrian refugees. Yamna Patel has the report.
Syrian migration has become a major political battle in Washington. Opposition to the refugee resettlement plans exploded after it was revealed that at least one suspect in the Paris attacks slipped into Europe posing as a Syrian refugee.
Our nation has always been welcoming, but we cannot let terrorists take advantage of our compassion. This is a moment where it's better to be safe than to be sorry.
At least 27 governors are now on record opposing the Obama administration's plan to resettle 10,000 Syrians in the U.S. next year. Amongst those opposing Obama's plan is Republican presidential candidate Jeb Bush.
But as it relates to the refugees, I think we need to do thorough screening.
Those screenings that Bush is talking about are a religious screening to differentiate between Muslims and Christians, something that Republican presidential candidate Ted Cruz also supports.
There is no doubt that millions of people are suffering from the rise of radical Islamic terrorism. Christians are suffering, Jews are suffering, and other Muslims are suffering.
But you're
They're
saying
being
Muslims
persecuted.
shouldn't be allowed in the U.S.?
What I'm saying is Syrian Muslim refugees should be resettled in the Middle East, in majority Muslim countries.
President Obama, however, is standing his ground.
We do not close our hearts to these victims of such violence and somehow start equating the issue of refugees with the issue of terrorism.
And it's not just the refugees who are being equated with terrorism. Muslim communities in North America are facing violent backlash against them. The morning after the Paris attacks, a mosque in St. Petersburg, Florida, woke up to threatening voicemails.
We're tired, and I'm personally have a militia that's going to come down to your Islamic Society of Pinellas County, firebomb you, shoot whoever's there on site in the head.
And at first, when I heard the voicemail, I was just like in shock. I was like, man, let me listen to this one more time.
I don't care if they're 2 years old or 100. I'm over your and the whole country is.
In Orlando, a Muslim family came home to find bullet holes in their rooms.
So they hit right here. This is where it came through.
In Ontario, Canada, a mosque was set on fire. Outside Austin, Texas, Muslim community members found pages of the Quran torn up and defecated on the front doorstep of their mosque.
This is very unexpected and, quite honestly, quite shocking.
But despite the spreading violence and hatred, Muslim community leaders say the best way to respond is with peace.
If I find the guy or girl who did this, I'd welcome him with open arms.
Yamna Patel, NYU Tonight.
Yamna is here with us tonight. Yamna, in your opinion, what are the implications of the increase in anti-Islamic sentiment?
Hey, Suzanne. So, something that is kind of confusing, but when you think about it, makes some sense, is that even though ISIS falsely claims to represent all Muslims and they claim to be an Islamic State, they actually stand to gain the most from this increase in Islamophobia and Islamophobic sentiment. Because part of ISIS's major recruiting tactic is to recruit from disenfranchised and marginalized youth in poor and underserved communities. So if our governments continue to marginalize these Muslim communities and discriminate against them here and against the Syrian refugees, all we're going to do is play into ISIS's hand, and that's just going to give ISIS more reason to go to these disenfranchised youth and say, you know what, hey, come join us. We'll give you a sense of belonging, and we'll even help you fight against those powers that were discriminating against you. So that's why it's really important for us to differentiate between ISIS, which is an extremist political group using Islam as a cover to further their political motives, and then the rest of the 1.2 billion Muslims in the world and those innocent Syrian refugees who have nothing to do with ISIS and who are trying to escape the wrath of ISIS in Iraq and Syria.
Thank you, Yamna, for your insight.
Yeah, thank you. Coming up, what do you need to do to get into NYU? We'll have that report later on, as well as the NYU landmark, the Kohl's Gym, is in its last season. We'll have that later on.
statistics about smoking indicate that 10% of Americans have kicked the habit in the past 18 years, researchers say. Our own Lizzie Gertis has the report.
New government statistics from the first half of this year indicate a 10% decline in adult smokers in the U.S. A report released by the CDC last week concluded that fewer than 15% of adults still smoke. That's the lowest percentage since the survey began in 1997, when almost a quarter of U.S. adults reported smoking regularly. Researchers from the CDC National Center for Health Statistics attribute the decline to smoking bans, higher costs of cigarettes, awareness campaigns, and increased support for smokers looking to kick the habit. Health officials hope the percentage of smokers will drop even further, aiming to see 12% or less by the year 2020. Lizzie Gertis, New York City.
New York University surgeons revealed the results of a shocking surgery on Monday from the most extensive facial transplant to date and the first facial transplant in New York State. Over 100 medical staff, led by Dr. Eduardo D. Rodriguez, collaborated at the NYU Langone Medical Center. Mississippi volunteer firefighter Patrick Hardison suffered severe burns in a 2001 house fire. Even after 70 reconstructive surgeries, as shown in the center photo, Hardison was still unable to blink and in danger of losing his eyesight. Hardison received a face from a 26-year-old bike mechanic who died in an accident in July. As shown in the right photo, Hardison received a new face, scalp, ears, and a nose, as well as eyelids and muscles, allowing him to blink. The process involved a year of preparation and had a 50% chance of success. Only 30 facial transplants have been performed in the U.S. to date.
That's an amazing story. It's application season, and NYU Tonight's Ryan Shushani has an exclusive interview with the Dean of Admissions.
NYU is one of the most applied to schools in the world. With over 50,000 applicants, students are wondering, what's a school like? How do we get in? Today we sat down with none other than the Dean of Admissions, Sean Abbott, where he shares some tips about applications and about the school culture. John, thank you so much for being here.
No problem.
So first thing I want to know, as head of the admissions team, what do you guys pay the most attention to?
What do we pay the most attention? I mean, I don't think you'd be surprised to know that one's academic record is absolutely going to be the driver in college admissions. So if there's any particular document or any particular credential that we focus on, it's likely going to be the transcript.
So you guys look at the GPA, the SATs?
More students' overall academic record in 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, really focusing on their grades and less the actual grade point average. When I review an application, the first document that I look at is actually the transcript and not the standardized testing profile. So when I say academic record, I'm really talking about one's high school performance in 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade.
So it's a popular theory that admissions people, they go ahead and they Google and they Facebook a lot of the applicants. You know, some students even go ahead and change their Facebook name during application season.
Yeah.
Have you ever gone and looked on Facebook for a student?
I have. I mean, I think if there is a reason for why I might look at for an applicant, or if I've been provoked to look at an applicant on any particular social media platform, I have to admit that I have done that. I think it's probably a pretty significant misconception that admission officers are out there trolling the internet looking for dirt on applicants, and it's certainly not a matter of protocol that as part of a policy we look at anything in particular on Facebook or YouTube or Instagram. But if provoked, if I'm encouraged to go look at something, I'll go look at it.
But what do you mean by provoked?
If someone suggests that I go look at someone online, if someone suggests that I look at someone's profile on any particular social media platform, typically it's an applicant that provokes me to go look at something that they want us to see on Instagram or Facebook. I mean, if a student has a particular organization that they're affiliated with, or they're in a band, or they're a part of something that might have a social media platform and they want me to investigate that, I will typically follow that direction and do that. But as a matter of protocol or as a matter of policy, we're typically not out there trolling the internet looking for dirt on our applicants. So
NYU is a very unique place. You know, it's clearly not for everyone.
Right.
But who is it for exactly?
Who is it for? I mean, that's a hard question to answer because in many senses, NYU is more a kingdom of schools and colleges. And while one might find a perfect match within a particular school or college at NYU, not everyone is right for every individual school or college or campus within NYU. But I would say, you know, if I have to identify some common characteristics that would make a student a good match for NYU, the immediate things that come to mind are things like urbane and cosmopolitan. I typically don't find that NYU is going to be a good match for a student that wants to live in a gated community. You know, a student that wants to live on a very traditional college campus where you know exactly what is NYU and what isn't NYU, because at least for the students that are coming to college in New York City and our campus in New York City, you're not going to find that clearly defined, demarcated campus. And if a student is really looking for that, they're not going to likely find that NYU is going to be a good match for them. Similarly, if students are looking for a more homogeneous, like college experience, they're not likely going to find that at NYU either. So I tend to find that most students have that kind of cosmopolitan trait or that cosmopolitan gene, and they have an interest in a world beyond one's own. And that tends to be a kind of a common characteristic or thread that surfaces among most NYU students.
Hollywood actor Charlie Sheen, known for his public meltdowns, made a major announcement about his health this morning on the Today Show. CNN's Jeremy Roth has the story.
That I am, in fact, HIV positive.
Charlie Sheen opened up to Matt Lauer on the Today Show Tuesday, announcing he was diagnosed with HIV about 4 years ago.
It's a hard 3 letters to absorb.
The diagnosis apparently came after suffering a series of migraines and hospitalization.
I thought I had brain tumor. I thought it was over.
Sheen says he decided to make the announcement because he was being extorted to the tune of more than $1 million by people he had trusted with the secret.
They were deep in my inner circle, and I thought that they could be helpful, and instead they, as I wrote, my trust turned to their treason.
With the announcement, Sheen hopes to help destigmatize the virus.
I have a responsibility now to better myself and to help a lot of other people.
I'm Jeremy Roth reporting.
What a sad story. And now, with us here, more on these developments is our entertainment reporter, Sharon Bernard. Sharon, will this news change perceptions of the controversial actor, and what else is happening in entertainment?
Thank you, Monica. That's a hard question to answer. On one hand, this may put his infamous rants a few years ago in a more sympathetic context, but on the other hand, a couple of his girlfriends have already come forward saying that Sheen never told them anything about being HIV positive. Now, this could be a case of he said, she said, because Sheen did tell Matt Lauer in the Today Show interview that he told all of his sexual partners about his diagnosis. Either way, this could end up being a legal issue for Sheen because California is one of 35 states where not divulging your HIV status to a sexual partner is illegal and could result in jail time. So far, Sheen's camp has had no response to these allegations, so we'll just have to see how they unfold. And of course, that's not the only thing happening in Hollywood. German car maker Porsche is trying to dismiss a wrongful death lawsuit filed by Paul Walker's daughter for his death in a car crash. Porsche said last week that Walker voluntarily and knowingly assumed all risk in riding his car due to the extensive modifications he had made to it, and thus was responsible for his own death. Lawyers for Walker's daughter are dismissing this claim, saying that Porsche is at fault. Again, this story is still developing, and we'll just have to see how this litigation turns out.
Thank you. And while most New Yorkers are grabbing their sunglasses, people in the northern parts of New Mexico are hiking up their pant legs and grabbing their snow boots. Albuquerque, Santa Fe, and other cities saw their first snow of the season on Monday. The storm was expected to drop at least a half a foot of snow on most of the state's northern mountains, and in Albuquerque, snow fell throughout much of the day and continued throughout much of this morning. About 4 to 8 inches of snow fell in the eastern mountains, with 2 to 4 inches in Albuquerque's northern heights. The good news is the snow doesn't seem to be sticking, so we can rule out any chances of black ice. But it was very, very wet and slushy, which made for a very messy commute this morning.
Urban Outfitters is getting into the pizza business. The Philadelphia-based company announced on Monday that it will acquire the Vetri family restaurants, which includes a pizza chain called Pizzeria Vetri. The price was not disclosed. Urban Outfitters shares dropped 7.5% after the announcement.
The Jerome S. Coles Recreation Center here at NYU will be undergoing a major renovation in preparation for a new stadium to be built. NYU reporters Kara Brantley-Jones and Catherine Jones have the story.
I'm Kara Brantley-Jones. I'm here at NYU's Kohl Center, home to many of its sports, and we're going to take an in-depth look into the center in its final days before it undergoes major renovations. Let's take a look. The Kohl Center, located at the corner of Houston and Mercer Street, is more than just a court. It houses most NYU home games and gives fans a space to cheer on their favorite teams. The girls' basketball team celebrated this season's home opener at the Kohl Center with a win.
So ladies, how did it feel ending this with a victory, and how will it feel not being here next semester?
Go ahead. I mean, definitely getting a victory on the last time we're playing at Kohl's is just the best way to end it. We're really going to miss Kohl's. It's a really great environment for all of us. It's going to be sad when we're not in the place.
Yeah, we're definitely going to miss Kohl's. It's like our second home here. If we're not playing, if we're not at practice, then we're upstairs taking a nap on the couches. So we're really going to miss this place. But it feels great to go out and win again. Because I'm a freshman, so it's kind of like a bummer just that it won't be like summer on campus. But I don't know.
The men's basketball team also came out victorious, winning their home opener against Purchase College. It was a bittersweet win because Kohl's will be closing soon for renovations. The captains of the men's basketball team shared their thoughts on the move.
Overall, good team effort. And as captains, how are you guys planning on helping the team adjust to the new space?
It's going to be tough, but we battled adversity before throughout our 4 years, so we're just going to have to adjust. It's going to be a little bit different, but we'll make it work.
Yeah, I mean, guys are going to have to make sacrifices with their class schedule and commuting and stuff like that, but I mean, there's nothing that we haven't seen before, so I think we're pretty ready for anything like that.
And how are you guys going to interact with the Baruch basketball team?
So I don't know how much interaction there'll be with the Baruch team. I know Baruch's making a ton of accommodations to make it feel like it's a home court for us. They'll put the NYU signs up and it'll feel like a home environment.
The Kohl's Recreation Center, which has been open since November 23, 1982, will be closing soon, and a new home gym will be built for NYU's sports teams as a replacement. Reporting for NYU, I'm Kiara Brantley.
That's it for our show tonight. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Suzanne Nguyen.
And I'm Monica Serrano. We'll be back next week. Good night.